Russian soldiers say morale below full level on the front lines of Ukraine. Hello everyone and welcome to the Arden Report. Today we are talking about Russian soldiers, talking about their morale being very low. Not only that, from Russian military bloggers have reported Russian commanders telling their troops to lie about the successes of the battlefield and not report the failures of them, so they will be in good standing with their bosses. All that and a little bit more coming to you on the Arden Report. First off, before we get into today's video, if you hear some background noise, the baby is awake, so I apologize for that in advance. However, I'll try to keep this as clear as possible. Me speaking. So a small group of Russian soldiers in Ukraine recently described their morale as being below floor level. This was from a Russian lieutenant in Ukraine. The Russian soldiers recorded the message while stationed in the Kherson region. Now, if you know anything about the counteroffensive, nothing really big has been going on in Kherson, the Kherson region lately. On the Russian side, yeah, Ukraine has sent some spec ops in and has taken some land. The land's all the marshes, and you can't put armor fighting vehicles there because it's just not going to work that way. So before Ukraine can actually do a main assault like you've been seeing on the other front lines in Ukraine, they're going to need armored vehicles, and they don't have solid ground yet. So Kherson's pretty much been unaffected in this counteroffensive. These are his words precisely from Lieutenant Konstantin, cannot pronounce his last name, Parobiv. I don't know. I'll show you guys it on screen. Maybe you guys can pronounce that. But Lieutenant Konstantin, we're taking heavy losses. Nearly 40% of personnel are lost. Morale of the troops is below floor level. Here are all the guys that are left from my platoon. I'm asking for your help so your relatives, husbands, sons, brothers could return home safe and alive, and my guys could return home too. So, when he says 40% of the personnel are lost, I believe he's talking about his platoon. And when he says that, not the whole Russian military, because that's not, there would be a ton of things happening in the counteroffensive, a ton of ground gained if that was the case, 9 times out of 10. So he's talking about his platoon here. However, I believe this platoon has seen combat during this counteroffensive, just because Kherson hasn't really seen a lot of combat, and for 40% of his platoon to be missing, not missing, dead, like they're gone, pretty most likely he saw combat experience in the counteroffensive, but not in Kherson. And again, these men were, I believe, recently stationed in the Kherson region. So let's go ahead and finish with what this dude was saying and his other soldiers. So the troops complained in the clips about being sent to the fight despite not being properly trained, according to World Translated, an independent media outlet. So I believe from just the name alone, they translate what the soldiers are saying in English or whatever country's language that's viewing it, so they can understand what they're saying. The lieutenant says his unit was mobilized without going through any military training. Okay, I don't know if he was a conscript before and went through military training before, but that doesn't really make sense because he said they were mobilized without going through any military training. So what you're seeing here is probably due to the losses that Russia is sustaining in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or the special military operation as the Russians like to call it. They're losing a ton of men, so they're sending in men that have never been trained before, and we've heard some reports from this on the Ukrainian side as well, sending men that have never even picked up a gun in their life before. So he described the training as simply digging, sawing, building, carrying, and other jobs. So I believe he could be trying to be sarcastic in this point by saying the only training they got was that, because just before he said no military training. So basically they literally were doing nothing military. He emphasizes that there was no medical or combat training whatsoever. So, okay, no medical training or combat training. That's very, very unfortunate for these lads, and they're supposed to be holding the line when Ukraine reaches the front line, the first line of defense. At least his platoon is most likely not the only case of this happening. He also added that the current location doesn't have logistics, transport, ammunition, excuse me, sorry, the thing just went back, medicine or sufficient provisions. So this is a very bad, if this dude's right, this is a very bad for these Russian soldiers. Of course, that just sucks that Russia's actually just sending them in without any of that, and basically like no logistics whatsoever. It could be the reason he was moved. They were moved to Kherson because of the less fighting over here. So the second part of what we're going to be discussing is Russian military staging successes in Ukraine. Now this one I find quite interesting because we see Russian military bloggers. So these military bloggers are not Ukrainian military bloggers. They're Ukrainian military bloggers talking about Russia doing corrupt things. Of course, Russia does corrupt things like every nation. However, most likely they're exaggerating. But these are Russian military bloggers, which from many Russian military bloggers I've seen and heard, they're very pro-war. And they're pissed off at the leadership right now because the leadership's not winning this war. So it's not like there's some Ukraine bought them off. Most likely that's not what happened. Most likely they're telling the truth. Same thing if a Ukrainian military blogger was saying something bad about Ukraine, probably going to take him more seriously than a Russian military blogger saying something bad about Ukraine. So a Russian war blogger has accused his country's military officials of encouraging Russian troops to exaggerate their successes in Ukraine. So this is something that you may be like, why is that so interesting? That's probably what's going to be happening. But the next part is what really is interesting. Before the next part, this is what the blogger continued to say, that the Russian servicemen have been instructed to report false success on the mission to please their commanders. So obviously Russian soldiers, according to this guy, all saying that things they did that they didn't do to please their commanders. The Russian military blogger also went to say that that the Russian soldiers were exaggerating their battlefield successes, and I'll show you the name of the military blogger right now. He's on Telegram. So again, and after that, the Russian military blogger said, commanders and peers actively discourage military personnel from writing honest but dull and negative report. So just by that statement, there's been dull and negative things happening to the Russians in this counteroffensive, and that why I say in this counteroffensive is because the only fighting that's going on is mainly because of the counteroffensive. So the Institute of the Study of War said the blogger indicated that the Russian soldiers have staged some scenes of battle destruction. I didn't outright say it, but this is basically saying it. He said the soldiers allegedly fired on already damaged Western combat vehicles from different angles on different days. So everybody got really stoked, at least the Russian crowd did, when the Leopard was destroyed and when Bradleys were destroyed. We got Bradley Square and a lot of stuff like that. So he's saying those were real. I believe a ton of those were real. Because it's artillery. Leopards aren't invincible tanks. However, this is what he has to say about this. Now, I'll say a vile and unpopular thing, but let at least one active officer point that out if I'm lying. Before and after the appearance of Western military equipment in general, a very popular way to give a good result upwards is to beautify fire at the enemy already destroyed equipment. So he's basically saying, let's say there was a Leopard destroyed from, I don't know, but let's say a week ago, they would come back and fire it at a different angle, the same exact Leopard. The Ukrainians obviously have not retrieved because it's destroyed and they don't want to lose lives, and say, hey, we took out another one. So that's what this Russian military blogger is saying, and this really points out that there's really not a lot of, there is a lot, but on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, but we're talking about the Russian side in this video in particular, there's really not a lot of honesty going on. I mean, you're going to have to, geolocating, there's people that geolocate footage for a reason, and there's people that do all that because these countries are doing what that, in this particular case, Russia is doing what that Russian military blogger said. They're firing at already they're firing at already destroyed Western equipment to make it seem like they're doing all this stuff. So it's quite hilarious, and the only conclusion that comes to my head and to my mind when I see something like this is that they're really not having that many successes. When Russia was, let's say, Ukraine in the Kharkiv counteroffensive, they weren't saying they captured villages that they didn't capture because they were doing so well they didn't feel the need to lie. So I just personally believe that, especially with that Russian soldier, and I'm sure his platoon's not alone in them not being trained and stuff like that. I believe Russia's going through a hard time right now, and if you guys watched my latest video, and if you guys didn't, the link is in the description and in the comment section, about this Russian lead Kremlin investigator saying that another coup will happen within 6 months. Either that or Prigozhin will be killed, and in the video, I explained further details in the video, but he basically said this coup would not only be backed by Wagner, but also the Russian elites that do not want the war to continue, because obviously it's not going in the way that they expected. So anyway, guys, this is a bit longer video, but thank you guys for watching to the end. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next Arden Report.